There are love stories we hear about, and then there are the ones that quietly change the way we believe in love itself. This is not the tale of a whirlwind romance or glamorous headlines. It's the story of two souls who found each other in the quiet corners of life, held on through storms, and built something unshakable. What does it take to stay by someone's side for over 3 decades? What secret moments, unseen by cameras, keep a love alive when the world keeps watching, waiting, doubting? Behind the smiles, behind the fame, lies a journey marked by laughter, sacrifice, fear, and one choice, made over and over: stay. And just when they thought they had weathered it all, life threw them a test that neither fortune nor fame could shield them from. Subscribe for more stories that will stay in your heart long after the video ends. The year was 1981, and Hollywood hummed with possibility. In the cramped, fluorescent-lit backstage area of the television set where Bosom Buddies was filmed, Tom Hanks moved with the restless energy of someone still discovering himself. He was 25 then, his hair thick and unruly, his smile quick, but sometimes uncertain. The young actor carried dreams in his pocket like loose change, always counting them, always wondering if they'd be enough. Tom had talent, yes, that much was clear to anyone who watched him work. But he was still climbing, still reaching, still that earnest young man from California who'd stumbled into comedy almost by accident. The weight of early fatherhood pressed on his shoulders like an invisible cloak. Between takes, he'd often stand alone, hands shoved deep in his pockets, thinking about the bills at home, about his young son Colin, about whether this strange business of making people laugh would ever truly pay off. Then she walked onto the set. Rita Wilson entered like morning light streaming through Venetian blinds, soft but impossible to ignore. She was there for a guest appearance, just one episode, but something about her presence shifted the very air in the room. Her smile came easily, genuine and warm, the kind that made everyone around her stand a little straighter. She moved with quiet confidence, her dark hair catching the studio lights, her eyes bright with intelligence and something else, something harder to name. The crew noticed her immediately. Not just because she was beautiful, though she undeniably was, but because of how she carried herself. There was no desperate hunger for attention, no calculated charm. She simply existed in her own skin with such comfort that it made others comfortable too. When Tom and Rita first spoke, it was nothing more than professional courtesy. A few words exchanged between scenes, perhaps a shared laugh at some behind-the-scenes mishap. He was married then, committed to the complex puzzle of young love and newer parenthood. She had her own life, her own ambitions, her own carefully laid plans that didn't include complications. But even in those brief moments, something flickered between them. Not attraction exactly, not yet, but recognition. The way two musicians might nod to each other across a crowded room, sensing a shared understanding of rhythm, of timing, of the spaces between notes that matter just as much as the music itself. Rita finished her work on the episode and left, taking with her only what she'd brought, leaving behind nothing but the faint scent of her perfume and the memory of her laughter echoing in the corners of the set. Tom returned to his routine, his lines, his life. But something had been planted, some small seed that would lie dormant in the rich soil of possibility. For long years passed like seasons changing outside a window you rarely look through. Tom's career evolved, his personal life shifted and resettled like sand after a wave. The entertainment industry spun its endless wheel of fortune, bringing some up, casting others down, always hungry for new stories, new faces, new dreams to devour or fulfill. By 1985, Tom had grown into his talent the way a man grows into a well-tailored suit. The uncertain edges had been worn smooth by experience. His divorce had been finalized, leaving him to navigate the complex terrain of single fatherhood while building a career that finally seemed to have solid ground beneath it. He was different now, more settled in some ways, more restless in others. When the casting for Volunteers brought Rita Wilson back into his orbit, it felt less like coincidence and more like destiny finally clearing its throat to speak. The film would take them both to Thailand, to a world away from Hollywood's familiar rhythms, where the usual rules seem suspended and anything might happen. This time, when their eyes met across the set, the recognition was immediate and electric. For years had added depth to both of them, carved character into their faces, given weight to their words. Tom found himself watching Rita between takes, noticing how she moved through the foreign landscape with the same quiet confidence she'd shown on that television set years before. Only now, there was something more, something that made his chest tighten with an emotion he wasn't quite ready to name. Their conversations began to stretch longer, wandering from work to life to dreams they'd never shared with anyone else. They discovered they both loved the same obscure films, both cherished quiet mornings, and believed in the power of small kindnesses. Rita's laugh became the sound Tom looked forward to most, and she found herself saving her best stories, her most honest observations for their talks. The cast and crew began to notice the way Tom and Rita gravitated toward each other during breaks, how their conversations created a bubble of intimacy even in the chaos of a film set. There was no scandal, no inappropriate behavior, just two people discovering that some connections transcend timing, transcend circumstance, transcend even the most carefully constructed plans. When filming wrapped and they prepared to return to their separate lives, both carried something new. Tom felt a stirring he hadn't experienced in years, a sense that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Rita returned home with Tom's laughter still ringing in her ears, and the unsettling realization that something profound had shifted in her carefully ordered world. Neither spoke of what was happening between them, but both knew. Some stories begin not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with the quiet recognition that everything you thought you knew about your own heart might be beautifully, terrifyingly wrong. The divorce papers felt like autumn leaves in Tom's hands, brittle and final. He sat in his empty apartment, surrounded by the scattered remnants of a life that had once felt so certain, so carefully constructed. The silence pressed against him from all sides, broken only by the distant hum of Los Angeles traffic and the occasional sound of his own ragged breathing. 30 years old and starting over. The thought terrified him more than any role he'd ever taken on, more than any stage fright he'd ever conquered. He stared at his reflection in the dark window and wondered if this was it, if he'd already used up his quota of happiness, if the love songs and romantic comedies were just beautiful lies designed to make people like him feel even more alone. But life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it, when we've convinced ourselves that the best chapters have already been written. Rita Wilson walked back into his world not with fanfare or dramatic timing, but with the gentle persistence of morning light finding its way through curtains you forgot to close. This time, there were no cameras rolling, no scripts to follow, no crew members watching from the sidelines. Just two people who had learned something about themselves in the years since Thailand, who had grown comfortable with their own shadows and were ready to step into the light together. They began with conversations that stretched like lazy afternoons, wandering through topics they'd never dared explore before. Tom found himself telling Rita about his fears, his dreams for his son Colin, his uncertainty about whether he was strong enough to be the man he wanted to become. Rita listened with the kind of attention that felt like a gift, her eyes never wandering, her responses thoughtful and honest. Los Angeles became their private playground. They walked along the beach in Santa Monica as the sun painted the sky in shades of coral and gold, their bare feet sinking into sand that still held the warmth of the day. They discovered hole-in-the-wall restaurants where the food was simple but perfect, where they could sit in corner booths and talk until the waitstaff started stacking chairs on tables around them. Tom's friends began to notice the change in him before he did. The tension that had lived in his shoulders for months started to ease. His laugh came more quickly, lasted longer. There was a lightness in his step that hadn't been there since before his marriage fell apart, maybe even longer than that. Rita approached their growing connection with the caution of someone who had learned that the most beautiful things were often the most fragile. She had watched too many Hollywood relationships combust under the pressure of public scrutiny and private expectations. But with Tom, something felt different. Safer, He never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give. Instead, he created space for her to unfold at her own pace, like a flower opening to morning sun. December 1986 brought the premiere of Three Amigos, and with it, their first public appearance together. The red carpet stretched before them like a river of possibility and terror. Tom adjusted his tie nervously, while Rita smoothed her dress, both of them acutely aware that stepping out together would transform their private joy into public property. The photographer's flashes exploded like fireworks as they posed together, Tom's hand gentle but protective at the small of Rita's back, her smile radiant but slightly uncertain. The entertainment reporters shouted questions that dissolved into white noise, but neither Tom nor Rita heard them. They were too busy marveling at how natural it felt to stand side by side, how right it seemed despite all the reasons it should have felt overwhelming. The headlines the next day speculated wildly. New romance or close friendship, Hollywood fling or something deeper. But Tom and Rita paid little attention to the noise. They had discovered something far more valuable than the approval or curiosity of strangers. In quiet restaurants tucked away from the main thoroughfares, they shared stories that had never left their lips before. Tom told Rita about the loneliness of his childhood, how he'd learned to make people laugh because it was easier than letting them see him cry. Rita spoke of her own dreams, the ones she'd buried under the weight of other people's expectations, the person she was still becoming. Tom found in Rita something he hadn't even known he was searching for. Not just love, though that was certainly part of it, but a kind of peace that settled into his bones like warm honey. She saw him not as the rising star, or the divorced father, or any of the other labels the world insisted on pinning to him, but simply as Tom. The man who worried too much, who loved too deeply, who believed in second chances even when they seemed impossible. Rita discovered that true love didn't feel like the dramatic passion she'd seen in movies or read about in books. It felt like coming home after a long journey, like finding a language she'd always known but never had anyone to speak it with. Tom didn't try to change her or complete her or any of the other romantic cliches that had always made her uncomfortable. Instead, he simply loved her as she was while encouraging her to become whoever she wanted to be. They traveled together when their schedules allowed, exploring new cities with the wonder of children who had been given permission to stay up past their bedtime. In small hotel rooms and rented cars, in foreign restaurants and unfamiliar streets, they built a foundation of shared experiences that would support them through whatever storms lay ahead. 2 years passed like pages turning in a favorite book, each day adding another layer to their understanding of each other and themselves. Tom woke up one morning in April 1988 and realized that he couldn't imagine his life without Rita in it, couldn't picture a future that didn't include her laugh, her wisdom, her gentle strength. When he proposed, it wasn't with grand gestures or public declarations. It was quiet, intimate, as natural as breathing. Rita's yes came without hesitation, as if she'd been waiting her whole life to say that single, perfect word. They married discreetly, surrounded by family and close friends, their hearts so full of love and gratitude that they could barely contain the joy that threatened to spill over into tears of pure happiness. Marriage, they discovered, was not the fairy tale ending, but the beautiful beginning of something far more complex and rewarding than either had imagined. Tom and Rita made a conscious choice to live simply, to build their life together on a foundation of authenticity rather than the glittering facade that Hollywood so often demanded of its stars. Their home became a sanctuary where the ordinary was celebrated and the extraordinary was simply Tuesday. No grand gestures or dramatic declarations were needed here, just the quiet miracle of two people choosing each other every single day, in the mundane moments as much as the magical ones. August 1990 brought with it the kind of heat that makes Los Angeles shimmer like a mirage, and into that shimmering world came Chester Marlon Hanks, their first child together. Chet arrived with tiny fists and a voice that announced to the world that he had things to say, important things, and everyone better listen. Tom stood in the hospital corridor holding his newborn son, tears streaming down his face as he marveled at the perfect weight of this small life in his arms. He was no stranger to fatherhood, having welcomed Colin and Elizabeth from his first marriage, but this moment felt different, touched with the sweetness of second chances and the deep contentment of a man who had finally found his place in the world. Rita watched her husband cradle their baby and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. The love she felt for this small person was fierce and immediate, but watching Tom become a father again, seeing the tender way he touched Chet's impossibly small fingers, filled her with an even deeper appreciation for the man she had married. The blended family that emerged was not without its challenges. Colin and Elizabeth, now teenagers navigating the complex waters of adolescence, had to adjust to Rita's presence in their lives, to sharing their father's attention with new siblings and new rhythms. But Rita approached her role as stepmother with the same thoughtful grace she brought to everything else, never trying to replace their mother, but simply offering another safe harbor in their sometimes stormy young lives. Their house pulsed with the beautiful chaos of family life. Lego blocks migrated from room to room like colorful nomads. The refrigerator became a gallery of artwork that would never hang in museums, but was treasured more than any masterpiece. Music drifted from various rooms at all hours, sometimes harmonious, sometimes cacophonous, always full of life. Tom discovered that being present as a father was not just about physical proximity, but about showing up emotionally, about getting down on the floor to build castles, and getting back up to have difficult conversations. He learned to braid hair, albeit poorly, and to make pancakes that looked more like abstract art than breakfast food. His children didn't care about his growing fame or his expanding filmography. They cared that he knew their favorite bedtime stories by heart and that he never missed a school play, no matter how small the role. Rita found her own rhythm between motherhood and her career, refusing to sacrifice one for the other, but instead weaving them together into something uniquely her own. She would rehearse lines while folding laundry, take calls from her agent while pushing swings at the playground. The entertainment industry had taught her many things, but her children taught her what truly mattered. On film sets, Tom's trailer became a shrine to his family. Photos of Rita and the children covered every available surface, and visiting reporters would often comment on how his face lit up when he talked about them. He carried their drawings in his wallet and their voices in his heart, calling home between takes just to hear about homework and soccer practice and the million small dramas that make up childhood. 5 years later, in 1995, Truman Theodore Hanks made his entrance into the world, completing their family with the same dramatic flair that seemed to run in the family genes. If Chet had announced his arrival, Truman seemed to suggest that perhaps everyone could calm down just a little bit. Thank you very much. He was their contemplative child, the one who watched and listened and absorbed everything around him with the kind of intensity that made his parents wonder what ancient soul had taken residence in their youngest son. Tom and Rita navigated the beautiful mundanity of raising children together. There were sleepless nights when teething babies refused all comfort, frantic mornings when everyone needed to be 3 places at once, and quiet evenings when homework battles gave way to family movie nights with everyone piled together on the couch like a pack of contented wolves. Tom's career trajectory during these years was nothing short of meteoric, with films like Forrest Gump and Philadelphia cementing his place in Hollywood history. But Rita remained his anchor, the person who could deflate his ego with a perfectly timed eye roll or boost his confidence with a knowing smile. When journalists asked about his success, he invariably mentioned her, calling her his anchor, his advisor, his best critic, and his biggest supporter, all rolled into one extraordinary woman. Rita, when pressed by interviewers about her own career choices and her husband's fame, would simply smile and say that Tom was her best friend, that their relationship was built on a foundation of genuine, like as much as love, and that she felt at home wherever he was, whether that was on a movie set in Prague or in their kitchen in Los Angeles, arguing about whose turn it was to take out the trash. At their dinner table, there were no scripts, no cameras, no audience except for each other. Just a family trying to figure out how to be human together, how to raise children who were grounded despite their father's fame, how to stay connected despite the pressures that pulled at them from all sides. Tom would tell anyone who would listen that Rita was his partner in everything, not just marriage, but in the grand adventure of building a life worth living. Rita would nod and add that with him, she had learned what it meant to feel truly at home, not in any particular place, but in the space they created together, in the love they had built from nothing more than two hearts that recognized each other across a crowded room and decided to take a chance on forever. In the end, that's what they had become for each other and for their children: home. Not a place you could find on any map, but a feeling you carried wherever you went, the absolute certainty that you were loved exactly as you were, messy and imperfect and beautifully, gloriously human. The 1990s arrived like a golden wave, lifting Tom Hanks to heights that even his most ambitious dreams had never dared to imagine. The boy from California, who had once wondered if comedy would ever truly pay off, found himself standing on stages around the world, clutching golden statues and delivering speeches that would be remembered long after the applause faded. Philadelphia broke hearts and changed minds. Forrest Gump became a cultural phenomenon that transcended cinema. The Academy Awards came calling not once, but twice, and suddenly Tom wasn't just an actor, but an icon, a symbol of everything good and decent and authentically American in Hollywood's often cynical landscape. But success, Tom and Rita discovered, was like a spotlight that could either illuminate or blind, depending on how you chose to stand in its glare. For every moment of triumph, there were a dozen moments that tested their relationship in ways they hadn't anticipated. The demands on Tom's time multiplied exponentially. Scripts poured in from every corner of the industry. Everyone wanted a piece of him, a moment of his attention, a fragment of his golden touch. Rita watched her husband navigate this new terrain with a mixture of pride and protectiveness that surprised her with its intensity. She had always known he was talented, but seeing the world finally recognize what she had seen from the beginning filled her with a fierce joy that was entirely separate from her own ambitions and dreams. Because Rita was building something too, something that belonged entirely to her. While Tom's star ascended, she quietly and purposefully crafted her own path through the entertainment landscape. She acted with a precision and intelligence that demanded respect. Her voice, rich and nuanced, found its way into recording studios and onto stages where she could explore the musical side of her soul that had always yearned for expression. When opportunities arose to produce, she seized them with the same thoughtful determination she brought to everything else in her life. She wasn't trying to ride on Tom's coattails or compete with his success. She was simply being Rita, fully and unapologetically, and the industry began to take notice. Their collaboration on My Big Fat Greek Wedding became a testament to what they could accomplish when they combined their individual strengths. Tom's instincts as a storyteller merged seamlessly with Rita's eye for authentic emotion and her understanding of what audiences truly craved. They worked side by side in conference rooms and editing suites, sometimes agreeing instantly, sometimes debating passionately, but always respecting each other's creative vision. Learning to separate their professional lives from their personal relationship proved to be one of their greatest challenges and most valuable lessons. There were evenings when they came home still arguing about a creative decision, their voices rising in the kitchen while dinner grew cold on the stove. There were mornings when the tension from a disagreement at work followed them into their bedroom, creating an uncomfortable distance that neither knew quite how to bridge. But they learned. Slowly, sometimes painfully, they developed the ability to leave work at work, to remember that the person sitting across from them at breakfast was not a business partner or a creative collaborator, but the love of their life, the person they had chosen to build a family with, the heart that beat in rhythm with their own. Tom's acceptance speeches during those golden years invariably mentioned Rita, his voice catching slightly as he looked out into the audience and found her face among the sea of formal wear and bright lights. "Without Rita," he said one memorable evening, his Oscar heavy in his hands, "none of this would have any meaning at all." The cameras caught her dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, her smile radiant with the kind of love that doesn't need public validation but treasures it nonetheless. In her own interviews, Rita consistently reinforced their partnership, never allowing journalists to paint her as the woman behind the man or reduce her to a supporting role in someone else's story. "We're a team," she would say simply, and something in her voice made it clear that this was not a cliché but a hard-won truth, a philosophy they had tested against the pressures of fame and found solid. Their close friends marveled at the effortless way they moved through the world together, the casual intimacy that persisted even in crowded rooms full of Hollywood's most powerful players. They were not perfect, and they never pretended to be. They bickered about directions in the car, and forgot each other's favorite restaurants, and sometimes said the wrong thing at exactly the wrong moment, just like any other couple navigating the beautiful mess of long-term love. Their anniversary celebrations became legendary among their inner circle, not for their extravagance, but for their simplicity. Pizza delivered to their living room, eaten off paper plates while they watched old movies and pointed out all the continuity errors. These were the moments that sustained them, the quiet celebrations that reminded them who they had been before the world knew their names. They developed the ability to laugh at themselves with the kind of self-deprecating humor that kept their egos in check and their relationship grounded. Old photographs from red carpet events would send them into fits of giggles over fashion choices that had seemed so important at the time. Tom would do impressions of his own overly earnest speeches, while Rita would recreate her most awkward interview moments with such perfect comedic timing that they would both dissolve into the kind of laughter that brings tears to your eyes. Time, they discovered, was both their greatest enemy and their most faithful ally. It brought changes they couldn't control: lines around their eyes, gray threads in their hair, the gradual slowing down that comes to everyone who is lucky enough to age together. But it also brought wisdom, the kind of deep understanding that could only be earned through years of choosing each other through sickness and health, success and failure, joy and sorrow. Tom learned to apologize when he was wrong, really apologize, not just with words, but with the kind of vulnerability that required him to examine his own behavior and acknowledge his mistakes without deflection or excuse. Rita learned to loosen her grip on control when circumstances demanded flexibility, to trust that some things could be left to chance or to Tom's different way of handling situations. They grew together rather than simply growing older side by side, their individual evolution strengthening rather than threatening their bond. Love, they discovered, was not a static thing to be achieved and then maintained, but a living, breathing entity that required constant care and feeding, that changed and deepened and surprised them even after decades of thinking they knew everything there was to know about each other's hearts. And in that discovery, they found something more precious than any award or accolade the world could offer: the rare and beautiful knowledge that they were still becoming, still learning, still falling in love with new versions of each other with each passing year. The phone call came on an ordinary Tuesday in 2015, the kind of day that starts with coffee and newspapers and the comfortable assumption that life will continue exactly as it has been. But some moments divide our lives into before and after, and for Tom and Rita, this was one of those moments that would forever change the color of their world. Breast cancer. Two words that hung in the air between them, like a verdict neither was prepared to hear. Rita sat in the doctor's office, Tom's hand wrapped around hers so tightly that later she would find the imprint of his wedding ring pressed into her palm, like a promise made visible. The world they had built so carefully, so lovingly, seemed to stop spinning for one terrible, crystalline moment. All the red carpets and award ceremonies and carefully scheduled promotional tours suddenly felt as insubstantial as morning mist. Nothing mattered except this woman, this extraordinary woman who had been his anchor and his joy for nearly 3 decades, and the fight that lay ahead of them. Tom canceled everything. Scripts that had been months in development, appearances that publicists insisted were crucial, meetings that studios claimed couldn't be postponed. None of it mattered. His place was beside Rita, and no amount of professional obligation or financial pressure could move him from that position. The medical appointments became their new routine, replacing premieres and production meetings with consultations and treatment plans. Tom learned the language of oncology the way he had once learned lines for difficult roles, absorbing information about chemotherapy protocols and surgical options with the desperate focus of a man trying to save the most important thing in his life. Rita faced each appointment, each test, each frightening step forward with a courage that left Tom breathless with admiration. She researched her condition with the same thoroughness she brought to preparing for roles, asking questions that made doctors pause and think more carefully about their responses. She was not a passive patient, but an active participant in her own healing, fighting for her life with an intelligence and determination that reminded Tom why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. In interviews during this period, Tom's voice would catch when reporters asked about Rita's condition. "I'm just a spectator to her heroism," he would say, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "She's the one doing all the hard work. I just get to hold her hand and marvel at how strong she is." Their home transformed during those months of treatment. The usual Hollywood chaos of scripts and schedules gave way to something quieter, but infinitely more precious. Friends sent flowers that filled every room with color and fragrance. Cards from fans around the world created impromptu shrines of love and support on their kitchen counters. The house pulsed with a different kind of energy now, one built on hope and determination, and the fierce protective love of a family circling the wagons around one of their own. Rita's recovery became a series of small victories celebrated with the intensity usually reserved for major life events. A good test result was cause for champagne. A day without nausea meant takeout from their favorite restaurant. Each milestone passed was another reason to believe that life might return to something resembling normal, that the future they had planned together was still possible. Tom's gratitude during this period was almost overwhelming in its intensity. He thanked fans publicly for their messages of support, his voice heavy with emotion as he described reading their prayers and encouragement to Rita during her lowest moments. These strangers who loved them from afar had become part of their support system, their healing circle, their extended family. Rita's strength during treatment became legendary among their friends and colleagues. She continued working when she could, her creativity and passion undimmed by the physical challenges she faced. She sang to herself during chemotherapy sessions, turning the sterile treatment rooms into impromptu concert venues where nurses would pause in their work to listen to her voice, transforming medical procedures into something approaching beautiful. Just as they thought they had weathered the worst storm of their lives, 2020 brought challenges that no one could have anticipated. The world shut down as a pandemic swept across continents, and Tom and Rita found themselves among its early casualties when they contracted COVID-19 while Tom was filming in Australia. Isolated in a foreign country, far from their children and their familiar comforts, they became unwitting symbols of a global crisis. The news that America's most beloved actor and his wife had fallen ill sent shock waves around the world, transforming their personal health crisis into a public concern that reached far beyond the entertainment industry. Rita sang to herself and to Tom during their isolation, her voice floating through their quarantine accommodation like a lifeline connecting them to hope and healing. Tom, even while battling his own symptoms, maintained his role as America's comforting uncle, posting reassuring messages on social media that helped calm a frightened world. His steady presence and calm demeanor in the face of uncertainty reminded everyone that even in the darkest times, kindness and grace were still possible. They navigated the illness as they had navigated everything else in their marriage, together. When one felt weak, the other found strength. When fear threatened to overwhelm them, they reminded each other of all the battles they had already won, all the storms they had already weathered side by side. Their eventual recovery and return home was greeted with relief that extended far beyond their immediate circle. They had become symbols of resilience, proof that love could sustain us through even the most frightening uncertainties. Their experience reminded everyone that celebrity offered no protection against the vulnerabilities that make us human, but also that human connection and love could triumph over even the most daunting challenges. In the aftermath of these trials, Tom and Rita emerged with a deeper appreciation for the simple gifts they had sometimes taken for granted. Each morning they woke up healthy became a reason for celebration. Each dinner together, each walk on the beach, Each quiet evening at home was treasured with the intensity of people who had learned how quickly everything could change. They began sharing their stories more openly, understanding that their experiences could offer hope and inspiration to others facing similar battles. Rita spoke about the importance of early detection and the power of having a strong support system. Tom talked about the privilege of being able to love someone through their darkest moments and the unexpected gifts that could emerge from the most difficult times. Their bond, already strong after decades together, was tempered in the fire of these trials and emerged even more resilient. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable, had held each other through fear and pain and uncertainty, and had emerged with an even deeper understanding of what they meant to each other. The lights and glamour of Hollywood, they realized, had never been the source of their happiness. Their joy came from this simple, profound truth. They had found in each other a partner for all seasons, someone who'd stand beside them through whatever storms life might bring, someone who would celebrate their victories and share their burdens, someone who made even the darkest days bearable through the simple miracle of being loved completely and unconditionally. Time, they had learned, was not the enemy of love, but its greatest teacher. By 2023, Tom and Rita had accumulated 35 years of marriage, 35 years of choosing each other through decades that had brought triumph and heartbreak, fame and ordinary Tuesday afternoons, health scares and holiday mornings, the kind of rich tapestry that can only be woven by two people committed to staying in the same story for the long haul. Their anniversary that year was marked not by grand gestures or expensive gifts, but by something far more precious: the quiet amazement of two people who had somehow managed to grow old together without losing the spark that had first drawn them to each other across a crowded film set all those years ago. Social media platforms buzzed with vintage photographs that fans had unearthed from decades past. Images of Tom and Rita from the 80s and 90s, their faces young and eager, their bodies pressed close together at premieres and parties, their smiles radiating the kind of confidence that comes from believing the whole world is spread out before you like a gift waiting to be unwrapped. Tom's Instagram post that anniversary morning was characteristically simple, yet profound. "I love you, Mrs. Hanks," he wrote beneath a recent photograph of them walking hand in hand along a quiet beach. Their hair silver now, their steps perhaps a little slower, but their connection as visible as it had been when they were young and thought they knew everything about love. Rita's response, posted hours later, captured everything essential about their relationship in just 4 words: "Always you, always us." The simplicity of it moved thousands of strangers to tears, this glimpse into a love that had somehow managed to remain both private and universal, both uniquely theirs and yet recognizable to anyone who had ever hoped for a love that could last. They had become the kind of couple who could walk through busy Los Angeles streets without an entourage, their security consisting of nothing more than their clasped hands and the comfortable bubble of connection that surrounded them wherever they went. Paparazzi still followed them occasionally, but even the photographers seemed to respect the peaceful dignity with which they moved through the world, as if their love had created its own sacred space that commanded reverence rather than invasion. Their evenings at home had settled into rhythms that felt both comfortable and alive. Tom had discovered a passion for cooking during the pandemic, and Sunday dinners had become his domain, the kitchen filling with the scents of garlic and herbs while Rita sat at the counter with a glass of wine, offering commentary and stealing tastes when she thought he wasn't looking. These were the moments that sustained them now, not the red carpets or award ceremonies, but the simple pleasure of Tom concentrating over a cutting board while Rita hummed along to music playing from their old radio, the same radio they'd bought when Chet was a baby and had somehow never gotten around to replacing. On quiet evenings, Rita would settle at their piano, her fingers finding melodies that seemed to emerge from some deep well of contentment. Tom would pause whatever he was doing and listen, marveling as he always did at the pure sweetness of her voice, at the way she could transform their living room into a concert hall with nothing more than her presence and a song that might have been written just for him. Their children and grandchildren flowed through their house with the easy familiarity of family who knew they were always welcome. Colin and Elizabeth, now adults with children of their own, brought a different kind of chaos than they had as teenagers, but chaos nonetheless. Chet and Truman arrived with stories and questions, and the assumption that their parents' refrigerator would always be stocked with their favorite snacks, just as it had been when they were small. The dinner parties Rita organized had evolved over the years from Hollywood networking events to something more intimate and nourishing. Their table was more likely to host old friends sharing stories about their grandchildren than industry executives discussing their next big projects. Laughter came easier now, conversation wandered more freely, and nobody seemed to check their phones quite as obsessively as they might have a decade earlier. Tom still opened doors for Rita, still reached for her coat before she could grab it herself, still held her chair at restaurants with the same gallantry he had shown when they were young and trying to impress each other. These gestures had become so automatic that he barely thought about them, but Rita noticed every single one, treasuring them as evidence of a love that expressed itself in 1,000 small courtesies that never felt old-fashioned or performative, just beautifully, consistently kind. Rita still straightened Tom's collar before important events, still smoothed his hair when the Los Angeles wind had had its way with it, still caught his eye across crowded rooms, and smiled in a way that made him feel like the only person in the world who mattered. These tiny moments of care had become the foundation of their relationship, more important than any grand romantic gesture because they happened every day, without fanfare or expectation of gratitude. Their travels had taken on a different quality as they aged, less focused on exotic destinations and more interested in places that would allow them to simply be together without the pressure of schedules or obligations. They discovered small towns where nobody recognized them, bed and breakfasts where they could sleep late and take long walks without destinations, restaurants where the most important thing on the menu was time to sit and talk without interruption. Tom had developed the habit of hiding little notes for Rita in unexpected places. She would find them tucked into books she was reading, slipped into her suitcase when she traveled for work, taped to the bathroom mirror after he left early for a film shoot. The messages were never elaborate, just small reminders that he was thinking of her, that he loved her, that he was grateful for another day of getting to be married to his best friend. Rita kept every single note, storing them in a shoebox that had long ago overflowed and now required a small collection of containers to house her growing archive of love letters. Sometimes on days when the world felt particularly harsh or uncertain, she would read through them and remember that love was real, that it was possible for two people to choose each other every single day for decades and still find new reasons to be grateful for that choice. Their conversations had deepened with age, moving beyond the logistics of careers and child-rearing to encompass dreams they were still nurturing, fears they were learning to face, hopes for the years ahead that felt both precious and fragile in the way that hopes do when you understand how quickly everything can change. They had learned that the secret to lasting love was not the absence of conflict, but the commitment to working through it with honesty and grace. They had learned that forgiveness was not a single act, but a daily practice. They had learned that love was not about finding someone perfect, but about loving someone perfectly imperfect and allowing yourself to be loved in return despite your own beautiful flaws. Most importantly, they had learned that in the end, after all the movies and awards and public accolades had faded into memory, what would matter was this: they had found each other in a world full of people, had chosen each other through decades of change and challenge, and had somehow managed to keep seeing in each other's eyes the young people they had been when they first fell in love, still eager, still hopeful, still believing that the best was yet to come. And when they looked at each other now, across the breakfast table or in the quiet moments before sleep, they could still see those young people who had met in 1985 and decided to take a chance on forever. Their faces might show the passage of time, their bodies might move more slowly than they once did, but in their reflection in each other's eyes, they were still those two souls who had recognized something eternal in a moment that lasted just long enough to change everything. Across the red carpets that stretched like rivers of velvet under the relentless flashes of cameras, Tom and Rita walked side by side. Their fingers intertwined with the ease of those who know every curve, every scar, every story the other's hands carry. There, at the epicenter of Hollywood glamour, they become something rare and precious. A living example of true companionship. Journalists, always eager for labels that fit into headlines, have already crowned them the most solid couple in Hollywood. The words echo through magazines, websites, and TV shows, creating an almost mythic image around them. But Tom and Rita know the real foundation of their union is far from the spotlights, far from the red carpets and the deafening applause. For them, what truly matters happens in the small things. In those suspended moments when Rita says in interviews, with eyes glowing with sincerity, that they love doing the simplest things in life. Walking through their neighborhood, watching the seasons change in the leaves on the trees. Cooking together in their home kitchen, where Rita seasons dishes with softly sung tunes and Tom patiently learns the difference between oregano and basil. Watching old movies on the couch, wrapped in the same blanket that has witnessed hundreds of these intimate nights. Tom, even after all these years together, confesses with a touching vulnerability that he still feels that familiar flutter in his stomach every time he sees Rita walk into a room. It's as if time has stopped at their first meeting, as if his heart decided it would always be the first time. Always discovery, always enchantment. At the philanthropic events they attend, their hands remain intertwined as if they were love-struck teenagers. It's not just a pose for the cameras. It's the unconscious gesture of two people who have found a safe harbor in each other. Tom supports Rita's music career with an enthusiasm that goes far beyond marital duty. He's the first to arrive at rehearsals, the last to leave her shows, the one cheering the loudest in the audience. Rita, in turn, accompanies Tom to his movie premieres always with that smile she can't hide. It's not the diplomatic smile of a Hollywood wife. It's the smile of someone genuinely proud of her partner's work, who rejoices in every achievement as if it were her own victory. But it's at home where the real magic happens. Away from the cameras, the flashes, the contracts, and the commitments, they simply become Tom and Rita. Not stars, just two people who chose to share life with everything that entails. Close friends say, with an almost protective fondness in their voices, that they still talk for hours. Hours lost in conversations ranging from daily trivialities to the deepest fears of the soul. They exchange advice like others exchange gifts. Share fears like someone offering a sacred secret. Celebrate each other's accomplishments with a joy that is pure, without jealousy, without competition. When arguments come, as they do even in the strongest marriages, they have a simple and powerful rule. They never leave it for the next day. They never let the sun set on their anger. When one falls, the other is inevitably there to lift them up. It's an old and familiar dance, a choreography of love they've perfected over the years. It's not always easy. It's not always pretty, but it's always real. In the interviews they give together, Tom and Rita exude a harmonious blend of humor and tenderness. They laugh at their own quirks, joke about each other's flaws, but always with that underlying sweetness that makes everything softer. They never use the words perfect marriage because they know perfection is too pretty a lie to be real. Instead, they talk about a real marriage, about daily choices, about the constant and rewarding work of loving someone every single day. They are aware that they inspire other couples. They receive letters, messages, and stories from people who have found hope in their journey. But they don't carry this responsibility as a weight on their shoulders. They understand that true inspiration doesn't come from trying to be perfect for others, but from being authentic with yourself. In one of the most touching interviews they've given, Rita looked directly into the camera and said, with that sincerity that has always defined her, "We're two people who choose to be together every day." The phrase echoed like a mantra, simple and profound at the same time. Tom, beside her, reinforced it with a voice thick with emotion. "And I keep choosing." It wasn't a grand declaration. It was a whisper, heavy with promise, with future, with certainty. And for those watching from the outside, for those following their journey through the years, that daily, conscious choice overflows with love from every pore. It's a love that doesn't need to shout to be heard, that doesn't need grand gestures to be felt. It's a love revealed in a glance, in a discreet touch, in a shared laugh, in the comfortable silence of two people who know, without a shadow of a doubt, that they chose well. Today, Tom and Rita carry the marks of time with a pride that runs deeper than vanity, deeper than the shallow fears that plague so many in their industry. The lines that web around their eyes tell stories of laughter shared in countless hotel rooms across the world. The silver threads woven through their hair catch the light like precious metal, each strand a testament to years survived, challenges overcome, love sustained. They see beauty in all of it. Real beauty, the kind that can't be airbrushed or filtered or surgically erased. On social media, they share memories that sparkle with both humor and tenderness. Their posts aren't carefully curated by publicists or designed to sell anything other than the simple truth of a life well lived together. Old photographs surface like treasures from a chest that's been waiting decades to be opened. Pictures from movie sets where they first learned to see each other not as co-stars, but as soulmates. Travel photos where Rita's hair whips in Mediterranean winds while Tom's arm circles her waist like he's afraid she might float away. Family portraits where their children grow from gap-toothed grins to graduation caps to wedding dresses and tiny hands reaching for grandparents who melt at every touch. They comment on these photographs like two teenagers discovering love for the first time. Tom types things like, "Still the most beautiful woman in any room," under a picture of Rita at their son's wedding, her dress elegant, but her smile absolutely radiant. Rita responds to old behind-the-scenes photos with, "Remember when you forgot your lines because you were staring at me," followed by heart emojis that somehow don't feel silly when she uses them. In the quiet sanctuary of their home, they spend entire afternoons creating photo albums with their grandchildren. Little fingers point at pictures while Rita explains who everyone is, her voice soft with the kind of patience that only comes with age and wisdom. Tom kneels on the carpet, his knees protesting but his heart full, as he helps arrange memories in chronological order. They become emotional watching these tiny humans discover their family history, seeing the threads that connect one generation to the next. "Seeing our children create their own families," Tom says during one of their evening walks, his voice thick with wonder. "It's like watching the best movie you've ever seen, except you helped write the script." His words hang in the air between them, heavy with gratitude and amazement at the legacy they've built together. Not just the movies or the awards or the magazine covers, but these breathing, laughing, growing human beings who carry pieces of both of them into the future. Rita finds inspiration in these moments of generational continuity, composing songs that capture the bittersweet beauty of watching time flow like a river that never stops, but somehow manages to carry everything precious along with it. Her melodies have grown richer with age, more complex, layered with harmonies that only come from having lived through every season of love multiple times. Their nights have grown calmer now, filled with conversations that meander through decades of shared experience like gentle streams finding their way to the ocean. They sit on their porch, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in the comfortable silence that long marriages create. They remember the beginning, that movie set so many years ago, where two ambitious young people had no idea they were meeting their forever person. They laugh about how much they've learned since then. How naive they were about love, about marriage, about the sheer daily work of choosing each other again and again. They laugh about their first fight, about the time Rita threw her wedding ring in the garden during an argument, and they spent 3 hours with flashlights looking for it among the roses. They laugh about Tom's terrible cooking phase and Rita's brief obsession with redecorating every room in the house every 6 months. More importantly, they express gratitude for all the stumbles, all the moments when they nearly lost their way. Because those difficult times shaped them, carved out deeper spaces in their hearts for understanding and forgiveness, and the kind of love that doesn't just endure but actually grows stronger under pressure. They know with absolute certainty that fame will fade. The cameras will eventually turn toward younger faces, the awards will gather dust, the headlines will move on to other stories. But the bond between them, this thing they've built together day by day, year by year, will outlast all of it. It's not dependent on box office numbers or critical reviews or public opinion. It exists in a space that belongs only to them. They celebrate not just the big moments anymore, not just the anniversaries and birthdays and premieres, but the ordinary Tuesday mornings and the rainy Saturday afternoons. Tom has started saying, love isn't in the grand gestures or the anniversary dinners. Love is in the morning coffee, the way she still makes it just a little too strong, because that's how I like it. Rita always responds with that smile that started all. And in the afternoon tea breaks too, when you bring me honey instead of sugar because you know I'm trying to be healthier. These small acknowledgments of being truly seen, truly known, mean more than any red carpet moment ever could. They live in the present with a gratitude that's been earned through loss and joy in equal measure. But they also make plans because even after all these years, they still dream together. They talk about the trip to Ireland they want to take, about the documentary they might make about their life together, about the garden they want to expand next spring. Time has marked them, yes, but it has also blessed them with the rare gift of loving the same person through every version of themselves they've become. To the eyes of the world, they have everything. The mansion with its sweeping views, the awards glittering on shelves, the bank accounts that could buy small countries, the recognition that opens every door and grants every wish. But to their own eyes, to the vision that matters most, what they possess that's truly precious is each other. Everything else is just scenery in the movie of their life together. Tom has developed a ritual he treasures above all others. He likes to drive at night when the city lights blur into watercolor streaks and the world feels hushed and intimate. Rita sits beside him, her hand resting on his thigh, her head sometimes tilted back against the headrest as she watches the stars through the sunroof. They don't always talk during these drives. Sometimes the silence between them is more eloquent than any conversation, filled with the comfortable understanding that only comes from decades of shared nights like this. Rita has her own sacred time, those afternoon hours when she writes music while Tom reads nearby. She'll be curled in the corner of their oversized sofa, guitar cradled in her lap, humming melodies that seem to spring from the very air around them. Tom sits in his leather chair, glasses perched on his nose, completely absorbed in whatever novel has captured his imagination that week. But even lost in fictional worlds, he's acutely aware of her presence, of the soft scratching of her pen against paper, of the way she unconsciously taps her foot when a rhythm takes hold. In their garden, among the roses Rita planted their first year of marriage, and the fruit trees Tom added later, they lose themselves in conversations that could last hours. They'll start talking about something simple like what to have for dinner, and somehow find themselves deep in philosophical discussions about the meaning of success or the nature of happiness. These garden conversations have become legendary among their friends, who joke that Tom and Rita could solve the world's problems if they just spent enough time among the flower beds. Sometimes they engage in heated debates about old movies, their voices rising with mock indignation as they argue about whether Casablanca is better than the Philadelphia Story or if Hitchcock's best work was Vertigo or North by Northwest. They argue with the passion of film students, gesturing wildly with their wine glasses, completely invested in defending their positions. Of course, they're mostly just playing, delighting in the intellectual sparring that keeps their minds sharp and their connection vibrant. They've developed an entire language of inside jokes that no one else understands. References to moments from 30 years ago that still make them double over with laughter. Catchphrases from movies they've watched together that have become shorthand for entire conversations. When Rita says Tuesday fish in a particular tone, Tom knows exactly what she means, and he'll respond with a grin that carries the weight of 1,000 shared memories. When work or family obligations force them apart, even for just a few hours, they call each other with the frequency of teenagers in love. Rita will call from a grocery store to ask if they need more coffee, but really she's calling because she misses the sound of his voice. Tom will call from his agent's office just to hear her laugh, claiming he forgot whether they had dinner plans when he really just wanted to hear her say his name. They've created traditions that anchor their year like beloved holidays. Ice cream dates every summer evening when the heat makes the city shimmer like a mirage. Winter movie marathons where they hunker down with blankets and popcorn, watching everything from screwball comedies to foreign art films, their feet intertwined on the coffee table as snow falls outside their windows. Despite their fame and success, they maintain a curiosity about the world and the people in it that keeps them grounded and growing. They ask their server about her art classes, remember the names of their neighbors' children, engage with life at street level rather than floating above it in a bubble of celebrity privilege. Their charitable work happens quietly, without press releases or photo opportunities. They support literacy programs and music education, fund scholarships for underprivileged kids, donate to local food banks. They believe in giving back, but they don't believe in making a show of it. Their generosity flows from genuine compassion rather than public relations strategy. They make time for old friends, maintaining relationships that stretch back decades. Every few months, their home fills with laughter as high school classmates or early career colleagues gather around their dinner table. These friends keep them connected to the people they were before fame changed everything, reminding them of their roots and their values. Their birthday celebrations are intimate affairs, family and close friends gathered in their living room rather than at some trendy restaurant with paparazzi lurking outside. The gift that matters most is presence, not presence. The luxury they've learned to value above all others is time spent with people they love. Tom has started a tradition of writing Rita letters on special occasions. Not emails or texts, but actual handwritten letters on good paper with a fountain pen his grandfather gave him. He writes about what she means to him, about memories they've created, about hopes for the future. His handwriting is slightly shaky now, but every word carries the weight of deep affection. Rita keeps every single one of these letters in a wooden box hidden in her closet. Sometimes on difficult days, she'll take them out and read them in sequence, marveling at the consistency of his love, at how his feelings for her have only deepened with time. They talk about aging with a mixture of fear and humor that feels honest and real. They joke about Tom's knees that creak when he gets out of bed, about Rita's reading glasses that she's constantly misplacing. But underneath the laughter is a genuine concern about what the future holds, tempered by the knowledge that they'll face it together. They've learned that the secret to lasting love isn't finding the perfect person or avoiding all conflict. The secret is choosing to love again and again, even when it's difficult. Even when passion gives way to comfort, when excitement transforms into contentment, when the fire becomes a warm, steady glow. In the smallest moments of their daily life, they find poetry. In the way Tom still opens car doors for Rita, in how she still makes his coffee exactly the way he likes it, in their shared silence during morning news programs and their animated discussions afterward. They've understood, perhaps more clearly than most, that life is both brief and precious. That time is the only currency that truly matters. And they've decided, definitively and joyfully, that it's worth living fully. Hand in hand, heart to heart, day after ordinary, extraordinary day. Tom and Rita have transcended the boundaries of mere entertainment. They are more than artists now, more than actors or musicians or celebrities who grace magazine covers and trending topics. They have become something far more precious and rare in a world hungry for authentic role models. They have become living examples of what it means to use talent not just for personal gain, but for the elevation of the human spirit. In the competitive, often cutthroat world of Hollywood, they inspire their colleagues through their unwavering ethics and genuine humanity. Young actors seek them out at industry events, not for networking opportunities or career advice, but for something deeper. They want to understand how Tom and Rita have managed to navigate decades in the spotlight without losing themselves, without becoming cynical or bitter or hardened by the machine that chews up so many dreams. They are admired across generations in a way that speaks to something timeless in their appeal. Grandmothers who grew up watching Tom's early films share stories with granddaughters who discovered Rita's music on streaming platforms. Their fan base spans decades, cultures, and continents, united by the recognition of something authentic in a world often filled with manufactured personas and carefully crafted images. The honors and awards they receive now come not just for their artistic talents, though those remain formidable, but for their character. Lifetime Achievement Awards that celebrate not just box office success or chart-topping hits, but the way they've carried themselves through triumph and controversy alike. When they accept these accolades, their speeches invariably focus not on their own accomplishments, but on the people who helped them along the way. With young artists just beginning their careers, Tom and Rita serve as gentle mentors who encourage authenticity over popularity, integrity over immediate success. They speak at film schools and music academies, sharing not just technical knowledge, but life wisdom. They urge emerging talents to remain true to their artistic vision, even when market forces push them toward compromise. Their fame has become a platform for causes that matter deeply to them. Rather than lending their names to trendy charities for good publicity, they have committed themselves to long-term involvement in issues close to their hearts. Health campaigns that promote mental wellness and addiction recovery. Educational initiatives that bring arts programs to underprivileged schools. Environmental efforts that protect the natural beauty they've come to cherish even more with age. Tom has found his voice as an advocate for historical preservation and cultural memory. He narrates documentaries about forgotten heroes, speaks at museums about the importance of remembering our shared past, supports efforts to preserve the stories of ordinary people who lived through extraordinary times. His deep, resonant voice has become synonymous with gravitas and respectful remembrance. Rita channels her musical gifts towards supporting marginalized communities. She writes songs for benefit albums, performs at fundraisers for LGBTQ+ youth organizations, and uses her platform to amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard. Her music has become a bridge between different worlds, different experiences, different struggles. When they appear at these events, they don't arrive as untouchable stars floating above the crowd. They come as engaged human beings who understand that privilege comes with responsibility. They stay late, shake hands, listen to stories, ask questions that show they're genuinely invested in the work being done. Their speeches at these gatherings are marked by a humility that surprises people who expect celebrity ego. They speak of being servants to their craft, students of life, grateful recipients of opportunities they never take for granted. When they thank people, you can hear in their voices that they truly mean it. When journalists ask them about success, they invariably redirect the conversation toward family. They talk about the joy of watching their children find their own paths, about the privilege of being grandparents, about the friends who've stood by them through every season of their lives. Success, to them, isn't measured in box office receipts or Grammy nominations, but in the depth of their relationships and the positive impact they've had on others. When the subject turns to fame, they speak about purpose. About using whatever platform they've been given to make the world a little bit better, a little bit kinder, a little bit more hopeful. Fame, they've learned, is not a destination but a tool, not a reward but a responsibility. They have become living symbols of the possibility of aging with dignity in a culture obsessed with youth. In their 60s now, they move through the world with a confidence that comes not from perfect skin or endless energy, but from the knowledge of who they are and what they stand for. They prove that relevance doesn't require desperation, that grace doesn't require pretense. More than that, they demonstrate that it's possible to love the same person for decades while continuing to grow, change, and discover new depths in both yourself and your partner. In a world where relationships are often treated as disposable, where divorce statistics make long-term love seem almost mythical, Tom and Rita stand as proof that some things can last, can deepen, can become more beautiful with time. They show that generosity doesn't require fanfare or photo opportunities. Their charitable work happens quietly, consistently, without the need for publicity or recognition. They understand that true giving comes from the heart, not from the desire to be seen as generous. Those who know them personally, from household staff to longtime colleagues to childhood friends, remember them consistently as kind, and accessible people. They tip generously, remember names, ask about family members, treat everyone with the same respect regardless of their position or status. Their kindness isn't performative, it's simply who they are. They understand now that their story belongs not just to them, but to everyone who has found hope in their example. They've become part of the cultural conversation about what love can look like, what marriage can be, what success should mean. This knowledge could be overwhelming, but they carry it with responsibility rather than vanity. They accept their role as inspirational figures, not with pride, but with purpose. They know that every public appearance, every interview, every photograph sends a message about what's possible in love, in marriage, in life. They take that responsibility seriously without letting it burden them or change the fundamental truth of who they are. And so they continue living day by ordinary day, faithful to their beliefs, their values, their commitment to each other, and to making their corner of the world a little bit brighter. They understand that the greatest impact comes not from grand gestures, but from consistent choices, made with love, made with integrity, made with hope for a better tomorrow. And so we reach the end of Tom and Rita's extraordinary journey, but perhaps this is really where your own story begins. As you've listened to their decades of love, their triumphs and struggles, their quiet moments of grace, and their public displays of devotion, ask yourself this: what would you have done in their place? When the cameras stopped rolling and the world wasn't watching, when the glamour faded and only the real work of love remained, would you have had the courage to choose each other day after day, year after year? Would you have been brave enough to let your partner see every version of yourself, to grow old together without fear, to find poetry in the ordinary moments that make up a life? Their story isn't just about two celebrities who happened to find love in Hollywood. It's a mirror held up to all of us, reflecting our own capacity for devotion, for forgiveness, for the kind of love that doesn't just endure, but actually deepens with time. Tom and Rita teach us that the greatest role we'll ever play isn't on any stage or screen, but in the quiet drama of our own relationships, where the only audience that matters is the person who chose to build a life with us. They remind us that true success isn't measured in awards or accolades, but in the legacy of kindness we leave behind, in the love we give and receive, in the way we choose to see beauty, even when the world tells us we're past our prime. If their story has touched something deep within your heart, if it's made you want to call someone you love or hold them a little tighter tonight, then please don't let this moment pass without action. Subscribe to follow more stories that celebrate the triumph of the human spirit over time and circumstance. Hit that like button to let us know these tales of enduring love matter to you. And most importantly, share this story with someone who needs to remember that real love still exists, that it's still possible, that it's still worth fighting for. Because in a world that often feels divided and disconnected, stories like Tom and Rita's remind us that love, true love, remains our greatest hope and our most powerful force for good.